The scream when it came was not Alara's usual whimper of discomfort. The low moan that signaled a bad pain day was dawning. This was a raw, high-pitched shriek of pure, unadulterated agony, a sound that clawed its way from her daughter's bedroom and ripped through Marcus Thorne's heart like a jagged piece of shrapnel. He was in his home office, reviewing a complex case file, detailing the illicit diversion of prescription oncology drugs, his mind normally a fortress of clinical detachment, a necessity for his role as a supervisor in the state's medical equipment crimes unit. But that sound, Alara's sound, shattered his professional composure in an instant. He was already moving chair-scraping violently against the hardwood floor, his wife Chloe's terrified cry of "Mark Alara" echoing his own internal alarm. He found them in Alara's pastel-pink room, a space usually filled with soft toys and the quiet hum of her specialized air purifier. Alara, his brave, resilient 12-year-old, was thrashing on her bed. Her small body contorted, her face ashen and slick with a sheen of cold sweat. Her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps, her eyes wide with a terror Mark had only seen in the victims of profound trauma. Chloe was beside her, trying to soothe her, her own face pale with fear and helplessness. Her pain. "It's out of control, Mark." Chloe sobbed, her voice trembling. "The patches, they're not working. I just put a new one on an hour ago, like always, but it's like there's nothing." Alara suffered from a rare, aggressive form of juvenile-onset complex regional pain syndrome, a debilitating condition that turned her nervous system against her, making even the slightest touch feel like fire, the lightest breeze like broken glass against her skin. Her primary relief came from carefully titrated doctor-prescribed fentanyl patches, a lifeline that allowed her a semblance of a normal childhood, reducing her constant, agonizing pain to a dull, manageable ache on good days. Without them, her suffering was unimaginable. Mark's mind raced. A bad batch. A sudden tolerance spike. He moved to Alara's side, his voice gentle, despite the frantic hammering in his chest. "Alara, honey, where does it hurt the worst? Can you tell Daddy?" Her only response was another piercing scream, her small hand clutching her left arm, the site of her most recent patch application. With a growing sense of dread, Mark gently peeled back the edge of the translucent patch. Instead of the familiar slight tackiness and the faint, almost imperceptible medicated scent, his fingers met smooth, slick plastic. He pulled it further. Beneath it, there was no medicated gel, no delivery system. There was only a brightly colored, cartoonish image of a smiling unicorn. A sticker. A novelty sticker expertly trimmed to the exact size and shape of her prescription pain relief patch. Numb horror washed over him, cold and suffocating. He looked at the discarded patch from earlier that morning, lying on her nightstand. He picked it up, his hand shaking. Another unicorn. Someone had systematically replaced his daughter's life-altering medication with worthless decorative stickers. The central question burning through his shock and rising fury was not just who could commit such a monstrous, sadistic act against a child in chronic pain, but why and how had they gained access to her secured medication. Marcus Thorne's professional life was a constant, grim battle against the dark underbelly of the healthcare industry. As a supervising agent for the state's Specialized Medical Equipment Crimes Unit, he and his team investigated everything from sophisticated pharmaceutical diversion rings and fraudulent medical device manufacturers to instances of deliberate patient harm through medical tampering. He had seen greed, negligence, and outright malice in many forms. He had never imagined that his expertise, his daily immersion in the world of medical crime, would ever intersect so brutally, so intimately with his own family. His home, shared with Chloe, a compassionate and incredibly resilient former pediatric oncology nurse, and their beloved Alara, was his sanctuary, a haven meticulously designed to minimize Alara's pain and maximize her comfort. Alara's CRPS had manifested aggressively after a minor fracture when she was 7, transforming their lives into a relentless cycle of specialist appointments, physical therapy, medication management, and the constant gnawing anxiety of her unpredictable pain flares. The fentanyl patches prescribed by a leading pediatric pain specialist were a godsend, a carefully monitored treatment that had given Alara back precious pieces of her childhood, the ability to attend school part-time, to enjoy quiet hobbies, to sleep through the night without being tormented by her own nervous system. They stored the patches in a locked medical safe in their master bathroom. The application and replacement, a twice-daily ritual performed with clinical precision and loving care. The thought that someone had breached that sanctuary, had deliberately and methodically swapped out those vital patches, filled Mark with a cold, terrifying rage he had rarely experienced even in the face of the most hardened criminals. Their life, in the manicured, seemingly tranquil enclave of Aspen Ridge, a planned community with a notoriously overzealous homeowners association, had until recently been relatively peaceful, if medically complex. They had chosen the neighborhood for its good schools, its proximity to Alara's specialist hospital, and its promise of a quiet, supportive environment. For the most part, their neighbors were kind, offering polite smiles and occasionally a helping hand. But there was one notable grating exception: Mrs. Karen Holloway, the self-appointed Grand Inquisitor of Aspen Ridge HOA, a woman whose life seemed dedicated to the relentless pursuit of conformity and the punishment of any perceived infraction against her voluminous self-interpreted book of community bylaws. Mrs. Holloway, a woman with a helmet of lacquered blonde hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing and disapprove of everything, had made her intrusive presence felt almost from the day the Thorns moved in. Her initial complaints were petty, delivered with a saccharine smile that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. She'd commented on the unsightly clutter of medical supply deliveries left on their porch, for a few hours the inappropriate ramp they'd had professionally installed for Alara's occasional wheelchair use. It quite disrupts the aesthetic harmony of the streetscape, don't you think? And even the rather depressing drawn blinds on Alara's bedroom window on days when light sensitivity exacerbated her pain. Chloe, fiercely protective, had usually fielded these complaints, her responses polite but firm, asserting their right to manage Alara's care and live their lives without undue interference. Mark had advised a policy of calm documentation, hoping Mrs. Holloway was merely an officious nuisance who would eventually find other targets for her unsolicited opinions. He had underestimated the depth of her resentment and the dangerous nature of her obsessive intrusiveness. The inciting incident, the first truly overt sign that Karen Holloway's disapproval was morphing into something more sinister, had occurred about 2 months prior to the patch-swapping horror. Alara had been having a relatively good pain day and was sitting quietly on their front porch swing with Chloe, a specially designed patch discreetly placed on her upper arm, its translucent nature making it almost invisible. Karen Holloway, on one of her ceaseless neighborhood patrols, clipboard in hand, had stopped abruptly at their walkway. "Good afternoon, Chloe," she'd chirped, her gaze flicking with ill-concealed curiosity towards Alara's arm. "And, Alara, dear, feeling a bit better today, are we?" Before Chloe could respond, Holloway had continued, her voice taking on a patronizing, slightly skeptical tone. "I couldn't help but notice that adhesive bandage you seem to wear so often, Alara. Is that strictly necessary? It does look a trifle unhygienic if left on for too long, you know. And frankly, some residents have expressed mild concern about, well, the public display of medical accoutrements. It can be rather unsettling for the other children, creating unnecessary questions." Chloe had gone rigid with anger. "Mrs. Holloway," she'd said, her voice tight but controlled, "that is not a bandage. It is a prescribed medical treatment essential for our daughter's well-being. It is not up for public discussion or your aesthetic approval, and I assure you it is far from unhygienic." Holloway had merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Well, I'm sure you know best, dear. But appearances do matter in a community like Aspen Ridge. Perhaps something more discreet could be considered." She had then smiled that empty, dismissive smile and continued on her patrol, leaving Chloe trembling with rage and Alara looking confused and anxious. "Mommy," Alara had whispered, "does Mrs. Holloway think my special stickers are ugly?" Chloe had hugged her fiercely. "No, sweetie, no. Mrs. Holloway is just mistaken. Your patches are helping you, and that's all that matters." But the incident had left a bitter taste, a clear indication that Karen Holloway viewed Alara's illness not with compassion, but with suspicion and disapproval. The harassment, subtle at first, began to escalate. The first truly shocking incident involved a blatant invasion of Alara's privacy and an attempt to undermine her medical reality. The HOA had organized a small summer block party, and Chloe had brought Alara for a short while, hoping the distraction might lift her spirits. Alara was sitting quietly in a shaded area watching the other children when Karen Holloway approached her, a plate of cookies in hand and a false, solicitous smile plastered on her face. Chloe was momentarily distracted, speaking with another parent. Mark, who had been delayed at work, had not yet arrived. Holloway had knelt beside Alara. "Now, Alara, dear." She'd cooed, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Between you and me, all these aches and pains. Sometimes, if we think about them too much, they just feel worse, don't they? Are you quite sure you feel as poorly as your mother seems to believe? Sometimes, a little fresh air and positive thinking are the best medicine." Alara, confused and intimidated by the woman's probing questions and insincere tone, had simply stared at her, her anxiety mounting. Another mother, overhearing the inappropriate interrogation, had fortunately intervened, drawing Holloway away with a polite but firm comment about respecting a child's space. When Chloe learned what had happened, she was incandescent with fury. She confronted Holloway, who feigned innocence, claiming she was merely showing concern and offering gentle encouragement. The incident, however, felt like a deliberate attempt to gaslight a vulnerable child, to plant seeds of doubt about her own excruciating, very real pain. The second incident was a more formal, coercive tactic, clearly designed to isolate the Thorne family. Karen Holloway, in her capacity as HOA president, had sent out an email to all residents regarding the use of the community pool. Buried within a long list of mundane rules was a new, highly specific addendum. For the safety and comfort of all residents, individuals requiring constant, visible application of transdermal medical patches or other external medical devices are advised to consult with the HOA board before utilizing pool facilities to ensure appropriate hygienic protocols and liability considerations are addressed. The HOA reserves the right to restrict access, if deemed necessary, for community well-being. The implication was clear and discriminatory, directly targeting Alara. There was no legitimate hygienic concern. Alara's patches were waterproof and securely applied. This was a blatant attempt to marginalize her, to make her feel unwelcome, to deprive her of a simple childhood pleasure that, on her rare good days, brought her immense joy and therapeutic relief. Mark had immediately fired off a scathing legal letter to the HOA board citing ADA violations and threatening federal discrimination charges. The board, likely intimidated by the legal jargon and Mark's professional letterhead, had quickly backtracked, issuing a clarification email stating the rule was under review and would not be enforced. But the damage was done. Karen Holloway had shown her hand. She was not just a petty busybody. She was a vindictive bully with a dangerous fixation on Alara's illness. The Thornes had started to feel a growing sense of unease, a feeling that they were under siege in their own community. They doubled down on security measures, ensuring Alara's medical safe was always locked and that spare patches were kept well out of sight. They had not, however, anticipated the sheer audacity and depravity of someone physically swapping the patches themselves. The horrifying discovery of the unicorn stickers in place of Alara's fentanyl patches sent a shockwave of terror and cold, hard fury through Mark. His professional training immediately kicked in, a strange, detached part of his brain analyzing the situation, even as his heart shattered for his suffering child. While Chloe frantically called Alara's pediatric pain specialist, Dr. Ramirez, Mark carefully collected the removed sticker patches and the remaining ones from the current box, placing them in sterile evidence bags he kept in his work briefcase for emergencies. He noted the precise trim of the stickers, the way they mimicked the size and slight opacity of the real patches. This wasn't a random prank. This was calculated, deliberate, and chillingly well-executed medical tampering. This was a crime scene, and his daughter was the victim. Dr. Ramirez reached on her emergency line, was aghast. She instructed them to immediately administer a fast-acting breakthrough pain medication they had on hand for severe flares and to bring Alara to the hospital's pediatric emergency department without delay. The drive to the hospital was a blur of controlled panic, Alara's whimpers and cries from the back seat tearing at Mark's soul. Chloe sat with her murmuring reassurances, her own face a mask of anguish. At the hospital, a flurry of activity. Dr. Ramirez met them, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a grim urgency. Alara was stabilized, her pain slowly, painstakingly brought back under control with intravenous medication. The relief in Alara's eyes as the agony began to recede was palpable, but the terror of the preceding hours lingered. Once Alara was settled and sleeping fitfully under Chloe's watchful eye, Mark met with Dr. Ramirez and the hospital's risk management team. He presented the evidence bags containing the stickers. "This is a criminal act," Dr. Ramirez Mark stated, his voice low and charged with a dangerous quiet. "This is felony medical tampering and aggravated cruelty to a minor. Someone intentionally deprived my daughter of her prescribed pain medication and subjected her to excruciating, unnecessary suffering." Dr. Ramirez, a seasoned physician, looked shaken. "Mark, this is unthinkable." Who would do such a thing? That was the question burning in Mark's mind. His thoughts immediately went to Karen Holloway, her escalating hostility, her intrusive questions, her attempts to invalidate Alara's illness. It all pointed to a woman capable of profound cruelty and irrational behavior. But he needed proof, not just suspicion. His investigator's mind began to work, piecing together a plan. He contacted his most trusted senior agent, Special Agent Davies, from his unit. "Davies," he said, his voice tight, "I have a situation. A Code 1 personal. My daughter, Alara. Someone swapped her fentanyl patches with fakes. She's stable now, but it was bad. I need you to initiate a covert preliminary workup. I'll be handling the primary evidence chain of custody myself, but I need background possibles, quiet inquiries." He then contacted the local police department, speaking to a detective he knew, outlining the situation and informing them that his specialized state unit would likely be taking the lead due to the specific nature of medical tampering, but that he needed their immediate assistance in securing potential evidence at his home and canvassing the neighborhood. The midpoint twist. The crucial piece of evidence that would galvanize the investigation came from an unexpected source, yet one that, in hindsight, Mark realized he should have considered sooner. While the local police began a discreet canvass of their immediate neighbors, Mark returned home, his mind a whirl of grief fury and cold analytical strategy. He needed to determine how the patches had been accessed. The medical safe was in their master bathroom, always locked. Had Chloe or he inadvertently left it unsecured? Highly unlikely. Alara's bedroom spare patches were sometimes kept in a drawer there, also supposedly secure. As he walked through the house, his eyes scanning for anything out of place, he noticed it. On the small decorative shelf in the hallway, nestled amongst family photos, was Chloe's digital picture frame, a gift from Alara the previous Christmas. But it wasn't just a picture frame. Chloe, ever security conscious after a minor neighborhood break-in years ago, had, unbeknownst to Mark, until much later, replaced it with a newer model that had a cleverly concealed, motion-activated nanny cam function. She'd set it up primarily to keep an eye on package deliveries when they weren't home, its wide-angle lens covering their front door and a portion of the main hallway leading towards the bedrooms. With a surge of adrenaline, Mark accessed the camera's cloud storage via Chloe's tablet. He scrolled back through the footage from the past 48 hours, and there it was. Time-stamped at 2:17 p.m. the previous afternoon, while Chloe was in the backyard with Alara for a precious few minutes of carefully supervised fresh air, and Mark was at work. The footage showed Karen Holloway having apparently knocked and received no immediate answer, or perhaps she'd seen them in the yard, trying the front door handle. Finding it unlocked, a rare oversight Chloe later attributed to being distracted by a phone call just as they were stepping outside, Holloway had slipped inside. The camera recorded her moving stealthily down the hallway, pausing then glancing into Alara's room before proceeding towards the master bedroom and presumably the bathroom where the main supply of patches was kept in the safe. A few minutes later, she reappeared, walking briskly back towards the front door, a small, almost invisible something clutched in her hand. She hadn't known about the safe's specific location, but she had found the daily supply Chloe kept in a locked drawer in Alara's room for convenience. Chloe, devastated, remembered the drawer had been stiff that morning and she'd left it unlatched. The video was grainy, her face partially obscured at times, but it was unmistakably Karen Holloway. She had been in their house, uninvited, in the vicinity of Alara's medication. It wasn't conclusive proof of the swap itself, but it was damning circumstantial evidence of trespass and opportunity. Mark saved the footage, his hands trembling with a cold, hard rage. He immediately contacted Agent Davies and Detective Miller. "We have her," he said, his voice devoid of inflection. "We have Karen Holloway entering my house yesterday afternoon, uninvited, unauthorized. I want a warrant. Full forensic workup of her residence. We're looking for novelty stickers. specifically unicorns and any evidence of fentanyl patch, tampering, or disposal. The execution of the search warrant at Karen Holloway's meticulously kept, sterile-looking home was a study in professional precision. Mark, as a direct victim and family member, was not permitted to participate in the search itself, a protocol he understood and respected, however much it chafed. He waited with Detective Miller in an unmarked car down the street, Agent Davies overseeing the entry team from his unit, who were specialists in handling and preserving trace evidence, particularly in cases involving pharmaceuticals. Karen Holloway, confronted by a team of stony-faced state agents and local police at her doorstep, had initially reacted with performative outrage and indignation, threatening lawsuits, name-dropping influential community members, and demanding to speak to their superiors. Her bluster had quickly deflated, however, when presented with the search warrant signed by a judge authorizing a comprehensive search for specific items related to medical tampering and child endangerment. The search was methodical and thorough, and it yielded results far more conclusive than Mark had dared hope. In a craft drawer in Holloway's spare bedroom, amidst scrapbooking supplies and rolls of ribbon, they found a partially used sheet of novelty unicorn stickers, identical to those found on Alara's skin. Further, in her home office recycling bin, cleverly concealed beneath other papers, they discovered several discarded fentanyl patch backings, the actual prescription ones, and crucially, a small precision craft knife and a cutting mat with faint, almost invisible traces of the patch's hydrogel matrix. The implication was horrifyingly clear. Karen Holloway had not only swapped the patches, but had likely attempted to extract the potent fentanyl from the discarded ones, a reckless and incredibly dangerous act in itself. The forensic team also bagged her computer and other electronic devices for analysis. The motive was still unclear. Was it a twisted belief she was saving Alara from dangerous drugs, a sociopathic desire to inflict pain and assert control, or simply a profound, hateful resentment of a child whose illness inconvenienced her aesthetic sensibilities? Perhaps they would never fully know the depths of her depravity, but they had the evidence, more than enough. The climax came not at a public HOA meeting, which had been indefinitely postponed amidst the burgeoning scandal, but with Karen Holloway's formal arrest the following morning. Detective Miller and Agent Davies, accompanied by Mark, acting in his official capacity as MCU supervisor, as the evidence now clearly indicated a major felony medical crime falling under his unit's jurisdiction, confronted Karen Holloway as she attempted to leave her house suitcase in hand, a clear indication she was preparing to flee. Her face when she saw them was a mask of disbelief, quickly curdling into panicked fury. "This is harassment," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am a respected member of this community. You can't do this." Mark stepped forward, his voice cold, calm, and utterly devoid of the personal agony he felt. "Karen Holloway," he stated, his official badge clearly visible, "you are under arrest for multiple felony counts, including but not limited to criminal tampering with a consumer product in the first degree, specifically a prescribed Schedule II controlled substance, aggravated assault on a minor, reckless endangerment of a child, and third-degree burglary. These charges carry severe penalties, including substantial prison time." He then recited her Miranda rights, each word delivered with the precision of a legal indictment. Holloway stared at him, her eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and disbelief. I didn't. It was just... I thought they were just decorative children love stickers. I was trying to brighten her day. She's probably faking half of it anyway for attention." Her desperate, rambling denials, her pathetic attempt to minimize her horrific actions, only underscored her guilt and her complete lack of remorse or understanding of the gravity of her crimes. The forensic evidence Mrs. Holloway Agent Davies interjected smoothly, including the fentanyl residue on your craft supplies and the discarded patches found in your possession, tells a very different story, as does the security footage of you trespassing in the Thorne residence. The fight seemed to drain out of her, then replaced by a sallow, slack-jawed fear. The click of the handcuffs, as Detective Miller secured her wrists, was a sharp, satisfying sound, a small initial measure of justice for Alara's unimaginable suffering. The legal proceedings against Karen Holloway were complex and lengthy, but the evidence was overwhelming. The unicorn stickers, the craft knife, the discarded patch backings, the fentanyl residue, the security footage of her trespass. It all painted an undeniable picture of a calculated, malicious, and deeply disturbing crime. Mark's unit, the Medical Equipment Crimes Unit, took the lead on the medical tampering charges, which carried federal implications due to the nature of the controlled substance involved. The local district attorney's office vigorously pursued the state charges of aggravated assault and child endangerment. Holloway's attempts to plead insanity or diminished capacity were quickly dismantled by psychiatric evaluations that found her competent, albeit exhibiting strong narcissistic and antisocial personality traits. Throughout the trial, she maintained an air of aggrieved innocence, portraying herself as a misunderstood victim of overzealous parents and a biased legal system. The jury, however, was not swayed. They found Karen Holloway guilty on all major counts. The judge, in sentencing her to the maximum allowable prison term, delivered a scathing denunciation of her unfathomable cruelty and her sociopathic disregard for the sanctity of human life and the vulnerability of a child. He spoke of the profound betrayal of trust and the terror she had inflicted not just on Alara, but on the entire community. In addition to her lengthy incarceration, Holloway was ordered to pay substantial restitution to the Thorne family, though no amount of money could ever truly compensate for the trauma Alara had endured. A separate civil suit filed by Mark and Chloe resulted in a judgment that effectively stripped Holloway of all her assets, ensuring she would never again have the financial means to harm or harass another innocent victim. Alara's recovery was a long and arduous path. The immediate aftermath of the patch-swapping incident had seen a significant regression in her pain management. It took weeks for Dr. Ramirez and her team to restabilize her medication regimen, weeks filled with agonizing pain flares, sleepless nights, and a gnawing fear that the relief might never fully return. The psychological trauma was even more profound. Alara developed a deep-seated fear of anyone outside her immediate family touching her patches or her medical supplies. She suffered from nightmares and a heightened anxiety that made her reluctant to leave the perceived safety of her home. But Alara, as always, was a fighter. Supported by the unwavering love of her parents, the skilled care of her medical team, and the gentle guidance of a child psychologist specializing in trauma, she slowly began to heal. The Aspen Ridge community, shocked to its core by the revelation of Holloway's monstrous actions, rallied around the Thorne family with an outpouring of genuine compassion and support. Neighbors organized meal trains, offered to help with errands, and created a protective, watchful buffer around the Thorne home. The HOA was completely restructured, its old guard swept away, replaced by a new board committed to fostering a truly inclusive, supportive, and compassionate environment. They even organized a community fundraiser to help cover Alara's mounting medical and therapy expenses, a gesture that deeply touched Mark and Chloe. Months later, as the vibrant colors of autumn began to paint the trees in Aspen Ridge, Mark watched Alara from his office window. She was in their backyard with Chloe, her laughter still a little hesitant, but undeniably joyful, drifting through the open window as she pointed out a monarch butterfly to her mother. She was wearing her prescribed pain patch, a new, slightly different model with an extra security seal, a small but significant innovation born from her ordeal. Her pain was once again under control. Her spirit, though scarred, was slowly but surely mending. She was even beginning to talk about returning to school part-time. The road ahead would still have its challenges, her CRPS, a lifelong companion. But the darkness of Karen Holloway's cruelty had been met with the fierce, unwavering light of her father's love, his professional expertise, and a community that had finally chosen compassion over conformity. Mark knew that the memory of those unicorn stickers would forever be a chilling reminder of the evil that could lurk behind a facade of suburban respectability. But it would also stand as a testament to Alara's incredible resilience and to the profound, enduring power of justice. His work, he realized, had never been more personal, nor its victories more deeply felt. The lingering echo was not one of pain, but of his daughter's returning laughter, a sound more precious than any commendation, a melody of hope in a world that, despite its capacity for darkness, still held an infinite capacity for healing and love.